Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I'm here with John Chancellor from Teach the Soul. How are you, John?
I'm doing well, and you?
Doing really well.
Good.
Those of you who don't remember John is a colleague and a friend and a mentor, someone who's been reading on this planet for about 8 decades, even though he doesn't sound like that, and someone that I frequently turn to for advice and perspective when I can't figure it out myself. John's writing a book, and John, I want to figure out what you're calling the book again.
Words to Live and Work By. It's interesting, as little children, when one of our playmates said something negative toward us, we would retort with, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Well, it turns out that that was false bravado. We know very well that words are very powerful. They hurt, but they can also heal and help and inspire and motivate. I'm trying to use words to teach, inspire, motivate, and that's why I chose the title Words to Live and Work By.
I love it. And words are very powerful. They're the food of the intellect. Our society is based on words. The law is in language. We don't just pass things around by stories anymore. And I recommend that people regulate their own personal food economies using words also, which is part of why I wanted to have John on again to talk about a couple of quotations and how he's helped himself and others to implement them in a very practical way. There's more about that in the previous call. But for now, John, should we just jump into the first quote in your book and talk about how you make that practical for people?
I will. The first essay that I have in the current lineup is I'll Do It Myself. And I start with a quote by Frida Pinto. "Anybody, anywhere in the world, all they want is to be free to choose what they want to do without having someone tell them how to do it." That's a very powerful description of humans and their motivations. Have you ever tried to feed a 2-year-old hoping to get more of the food in their mouth than on the floor, only to be rebuffed and have a good cleanup job waiting for you? It's around that age that children start exhibiting a desire to be in control of their lives. They want to do things for themselves. And at the other end of the spectrum is elder care. If you've ever been a caregiver for an elderly person, you will know that one of the most difficult things to do is to help them. They are fiercely independent. Even though it would be easier on everybody for them to let you do things for them, they can be very stubborn. They want to do things. They want to put their shoes on themselves. They want to get things out of the fridge by themselves. So it turns out that one of the basic drives of humans is the desire for autonomy. When we try to do things for others, we rob them of opportunities for self-sufficiency. Now, psychologists Ellen Langer and Judy Roden performed an interesting study in the early 1970s to explore the relationship between autonomy and well-being. They observed that patients in most nursing homes lived in a decision-free environment where basically everything was decided for them. What they would eat, what time they would eat, the nursing staff, the care staff at the nursing homes would do everything for them. Even though the patients were well treated, they had very little choice in anything. They had no autonomy. So what the psychologists did was to divide the nursing home into two groups. One group was a control group, and the other group, they had a different condition. And they gave every patient a potted plant, the indoor potted plants, the kind you see in most people have in their homes. And one group, the control group, they just put the plant in their room. You don't have to do anything. The staff will water it, take care of it. The other group, they told the patients, okay, we're giving you a plant, but you have to take care of it. This was extremely interesting to me. 18 months later, the researchers conducted a follow-up study and discovered remarkable results. The patients who had to take care of their own plants were happier, more active, and more sociable than the patients in the group that had no responsibility for the plants. What was even more astounding was that the death rate in the control group, that is the group that didn't have to do anything, was twice as high as in the group that had to take care of their own plants. So, what's the lesson? What's the takeaway from this? We all have a basic need for control in our lives. Psychologists have discovered that there doesn't have to be a direct connection between our choices and the benefits. That is to say, there was no connection between the patient taking care of their plants and them living longer. It was the fact that they had choices.
Autonomy is essential for longevity.
Autonomy is essential for so many things. What this means for you, if you're dealing with your children, your spouse, your friends, your loved ones, don't try to tell them, dictate to them what they should do. Give them some autonomy in things. I think this is so important. And if you're trying to defeat food cravings, you generally have somebody around you who is well-meaning but misguided, and they will be telling you what you should be doing. That's just not the helpful way to do it.
May I talk at length?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think I've set you up for a good discussion here.
This is a softball, buddy. This is a real softball. I found that autonomy is a central measure in overeating problems, really in any kind of addiction, but in overeating problems in particular, where for some reason people feel like they want to make themselves dependent for a little while on a sponsor, on a doctor that gives them a particular diet, on book that they've read. And I find that that never works long term. It can work short term to kind of get you started, but it never seems to work long term. And my interpretation of it, first of all, was that I just needed to respect that as a fact, that autonomy was essential to overcome overeating. You had to be able to come up with your own food rules. If you did it for someone else or you followed some other dietary expert and were trying to do exactly what they said without really thinking it through and embracing it for yourself, then eventually your inner food monster says, when you start making mistakes, oh, it's that diet guru's problem, or it's that rule that Glenn gave you that's the problem. We're going to have to find someone else. But in the meantime, let's just eat as much as we possibly can and break all the rules. Nom, 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 nom. Psychologically, I had the impression that most people who struggled with overeating at some point were fed against their own best interest, not on purpose, but either they were given too much or the wrong things or at the wrong times, or they weren't fed when they really needed to be. And so there was a kind of existential angst and organismic distress around food when people were telling them what to eat. So I find that recovery involves embracing an autonomous food plan. It's perfectly fine to read diet books. It's perfectly fine to consult with experts. As a matter of fact, I recommend people do. But in the end, nobody can follow you around all day and watch what you put into your mouth and chew and swallow with your teeth and your tongue. Ultimately, it's really got to be up to you. I wanted to ask you, I just want to make sure we give those researchers credit. You happen to know their names?
Ellen Langer, Langer, and Judy Rodin, Rodin.
It was an old study, right? A very valid study, but an old study.
1970s, yes.
Yeah, but still very true.
When you stop and think about it, there's so many things in life where we need autonomy. I've dealt with a few clients where their relationship partner had a problem with alcohol abuse, and the worst thing in the world was the partner trying to harangue the other person into changing behavior. It never works. You will change behavior of your own accord, not because somebody else is telling you to. Actually, there's more resistance when somebody else is, even when they're suggesting very helpfully, it doesn't work. There's just a natural resistance to it. Somebody else suggesting what you should do.
There's a wrinkle with all this that I want to talk about in terms of implementing. In the military, the decisions are made by the officers. It's the generals and colonels that are sitting around the room and analyzing the situation on the battlefield and making strategic decisions. And there's a reason for that. There's a benefit to that because they've got the most experience and they're operating from their intellect. And then there are soldiers who execute in a way that's the polar opposite of having autonomy. Like ours is but to do or die, ours is not to reason why, right? It turns out that there is utility in implementing that with regards to your own eating, but you need to do it in such a way that you're still autonomous. So you need to play both roles. There needs to be a time when you are strategically considering what the operational orders you're going to give yourself are going to be. So General Livingston needs to step back and journal and figure out what set of food rules are best for me in order to accomplish the health and fitness goals I'm trying to accomplish. And then once I've really figured that out and I've operationalized them in very specific rules, like I will never have chocolate on a weekday again, or I will always stop eating at 7 o'clock at night if I'm eating at home, then those become marching orders that you're giving to Private Glenn. There is this Private Glenn that actually executes, and it's actually better in the day-to-day operations of making food decisions to have less decisions to make because you're carrying around a set of marching orders that makes the decisions for you. It's just that you're the one that actually put together the marching orders. And so, I tell people don't change your plans on a whim. Give yourself at least a 24-hour delay where you go back and consult with General Glenn about what Private Glenn is supposed to do. And this prevents you from eating on whim or emotion or impulse, and it creates a situation where you're really eating by design. In a nutshell, eating by design is the way that you overcome food problems. We're in an environment where there are so many temptations and so many food decisions, and willpower is the ability to make good decisions. You can only get so many good decisions every day. So when you can minimize decisions in the field by taking autonomous control in the strategic planning room, I found that that's the best of all possible worlds. Does it make sense?
Makes total sense. I think it's much easier for you to give General Glenn permission to make rules for you because there's two sides to General Glenn, but it's not a third party telling you what to do. So I think it's easier for us to psychologically accept General Glenn's got my best interests at heart, and I can rely on him.
And we kind of know that General Glenn is me even when we're being Private Glenn.
Right.
I was never in the Army, by the way, but I was born at Walter Reed Army Hospital. My dad was a captain.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.